Senator Mark Kelly had a blistering press conference yesterday where he lied, he finagled, he weaseled, and eventually melted down when actually having to admit the truth about President Trump and illegal orders to the military and all of the garbage he's been spewing. He's the worst, which means, of course, he's now a front runner for the Democrat nomination for president because, well, he's just right for them. And we'll get to that in like half a minute. But first, a quick word from our friends at Birch Gold. How'd you like some free silver? I'll tell you about it in just a second. But you know that you need to diversify your portfolio right now, right? The rate cuts that are coming from the Fed in 2026, the dollar's going to be worth less. And what happens if the AI bubble bursts? Smart people diversify. Birch Gold's going to help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And for every purchase of $5,000 or more, you're going to get a free ounce of silver from Birch Gold. Text my name, Larry, to 989898 to claim your eligibility. That's Larry to 989898. Birch Gold, free silver. Do it now. Now, back to the video. We're going to show you all of those details from his press conference. But first, how about the New York Times accidentally stumbling into the facts around this boat strike against the Venezuelan narco-terrorists? Here was the headline late last night, undermining all of the fake narratives that you saw yesterday, unless you only watched our show where we explained this story to you. Take a look at that headline. Hegseth ordered a lethal attack, but not the killing of survivors, officials say. Amid talk of war crimes, the details and precise sequence of a September 2nd attack on a boat in the Caribbean are facing intensifying scrutiny. This is the New York Times twisting themselves into a pretzel to try to reveal the facts of this case, but not completely throw their pals over at the Washington Post and CNN under the bus. But they couldn't avoid it because the facts have a way of doing that to liars like the Washington Post and Natasha Bertrand at CNN. Here are the details. According to 5 U.S. officials who spoke separately and on the condition of anonymity. By the way, I love the fact that now the Trump people and the Hegseth people at the Pentagon are playing the anonymous leak game. They're like, oh, okay, Washington Post, you've got your anonymous leakers from the Trump haters, from the Vindmans of the world. Okay, fine. We've got our own anonymous leakers. Hey, New York Times, how about this? Mr. Hegseth, ahead of the September 2nd attack, ordered a strike that would kill the people on the boat and destroy the vessel and its purported cargo of drugs. We said this yesterday. The strike, these are bad guys. These are terrorists. Shoot to kill. That's what SEAL Team 6 does. And so you shoot. And if there's still stuff floating on the water, you shoot it again because you don't want the narcotics floating at the surface of the water so that the narcos can come back and pick it up and then send it to America again. That's what you do. But each official said Mr. Hegseth's directive did not specifically address what should happen if a first missile turned out not to fully accomplish all of those things. And the official said his order was not a response to surveillance footage showing that at least 2 people on the boat survived the first blast. Admiral Bradley, that would be Mitch Bradley, an admiral in charge of Spec Op. He is, by the way, a graduate of the Naval Academy in 1991. He immediately left the academy with his degree and his commission as an ensign and went right to Coronado and said, sign me up for the SEALs. Passed the BUDS test and has been a badass since day one. You know, we talk about boots on the ground in Afghanistan as a result of the 9/11 attacks. They were his boots. In fact, I would argue, and I don't know this for a fact, but when SEAL Team 6 landed in Afghanistan to go after the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and hunt down Osama bin Laden immediately after 9/11, those boots that were on the ground were probably on the ground in Afghanistan before any of us knew those boots were on the ground. That's what SEAL Team 6 does. And now this admiral is in charge of these operations. And you may not like the fact that their job is to kill the people who are trying to do harm to America, including narco-terrorists poisoning our children and bringing murderous gangs into this country. Have you heard about Train de Aragua? Do you know where they came from? After Biden let them all in, that's who we're talking about here. You may not like that, but these are the people, these are the warriors that protect our country and do what needs to be done. That's who Admiral Marshall is. And yes, the Secretary of War said, Admiral Marshall, do the job. And Admiral Marshall did the job. All right, back to the story. Excuse me, Admiral Bradley. I apologize. I confused my tanks for a minute there. Admiral Bradley ordered the initial missile strike and then several follow-up strikes that killed the initial survivors and sank the disabled boat, which is what you want to do. You don't want to leave the cargo of the boat. This boat was a threat. The cargo of the boat was a threat. The crew of the boat was a threat. You shoot to kill, and you destroy all of it. They say Mr. Hegseth did not give any further orders to him because that's how the military operates. Continuing the story, the two officials questioned whether the surviving people were Admiral Bradley's intended target in the second strike as opposed to the purported drugs and the disabled vessel. They argued that the purported cargo remained a threat and a lawful military target because another cartel-associated boat might have come to retrieve it. Obviously. So that was the New York Times last night, completely undermining the Washington Post, CNN and Natasha Bertrand, Senator Kelly, and all of the other maniacs in the mainstream media who have decided to Monday morning quarterback, armchair quarterback, and decide that they're the ones who know better about how a military campaign is supposed to be operated against narco-terrorists. And let's just remind you, this was the original article from the Washington Post, their big exclusive. You just heard the story from the New York Times with 5 sources from the Trump administration and the military that backs up exactly what the Trump administration said yesterday. Here's what the original story said. Hegseth order on first Caribbean boat strike, officials say, kill them all. Subhead, as 2 men clung to a stricken burning ship targeted by SEAL Team 6, the Joint Special Operations Commander followed the Defense Secretary's order to leave no survivors. I love the picture that they paint. It's like Leo DiCaprio was clinging to the side of the wooden door, trying to climb back up as the Titanic is sinking in the background and Celine Dion is singing. As these narco-terrorist, murderous thugs are getting what they deserve. And they make it sound like Pete Hegseth is watching this thing in real time, watches the video of the wreckage, and then picks up the phone and says to Admiral Marshall, kill them all. Kill them all. It's not exactly what happened, is it? So yesterday, before this New York Times article came out, Mark Kelly, the it girl of the Democrat Party now, trying to get some attention from Gavin Newsom and AOC, he held a press conference because, you know, he really hasn't gotten enough media recently. So he had to have a press conference about how horrible it is that he's just trying to do his duty. Didn't you see all my ribbons and medals on my jacket, damn it? And then he threw this one out.
President Trump is trying to silence me, threatening to kill me for saying what is true. And he sent his Secretary of Defense after me. And it's not going to work. Here's how we got here. A week and a half ago, Senator Slotkin and I, along with others who also served in the military and the intelligence communities, we released a video with a simple message to service members that they must refuse illegal orders. Nothing was controversial about that. Everyone must follow the law. No one may break the law. This is pretty basic stuff. Seeing that video, here's how any other president would have responded. They would have said 2 words, of course. But that's not how this president responded. We've become so accustomed to Donald Trump's behavior that it is worth emphasizing. The President of the United States said that 2 U.S. senators and 4 members of the House of Representatives should be arrested, hanged, executed for something we said.
This guy,
President Trump is trying.
This guy is such a pussy. And it drives me insane. And he's trying to do the tough guy act. And how dare you, sir? You know what he's trying? He's trying to do the, at long last, sir, have you no decency? We need a decent American patriot back in the White House. Me, Mark Kelly, because he's so upset about that. It's all such total and everybody knows that it is. It's like, all we did was put out a video that said no one should follow an illegal order. And normally a president would just say, of course. No, I don't think that's true. If Republicans put out a video when Barack Obama was president saying, hey, we want everyone in the military to know that they shouldn't follow any illegal orders from the president of the United States, you know that Mark Kelly would be leading the charge saying, how dare you, you racists, suggesting that Barack Obama isn't a legitimate president and he doesn't know what a lawful or unlawful order is. You're racist for suggesting that Barack Obama would even imply an illegal order, let alone give an illegal order. You know that that's what they would do. The whole purpose of that video was to undermine the president, undermine Donald Trump, and to make it appear as though Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. I'm sorry. The typical response of a president having heard that video that they put out would not be 2 words, of course. The 2 words would be, you. That's what the 2 words would be. Any normal president would see that video and say, what the hell are you talking about? I'm sorry, are you aware of some illegal orders that we put out? Then when this Venezuelan boat story hit, perfectly timed, by the way, from the Washington Post to deflect criticism from the seditious six, suddenly everybody started putting the pieces together saying, oh, so they obviously knew about this Venezuelan boat story and the illegal order to kill them all. That's what they were talking about. Oh, really? Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But this whole thing about, oh, Trump said that we should hang, that we should be hanged. Is that what Trump said? This is what Trump said. Trump put out this post that said the video that they put out was seditious behavior, punishable by death. Now, you can certainly put the pieces together, do the equations, and say, well, if this is seditious behavior, and by the way, it is factual that sedition is punishable by death. If this is seditious behavior, and if they're arrested for it, and if they're convicted for it, then they could be put to death, I suppose. But boy, you got to do a lot of heavy lifting to say Donald Trump just called for us to be hanged. But Mark Kelly immediately went there. But there's a reason why he immediately went there, because he wants to be president of the United States. And you know, there's 2 ways to be the Democrat nominee for president. You're either an American-hating Marxist, or you can pretend to be a patriot who wraps himself in the American flag or in all of his military medals and pretend to be some sort of innocent martyr that Donald Trump has attacked. And it appears as though Mark Kelly is going for the latter, because this is the fundraising letter he put out. He was so distraught and upset by Donald Trump's Truth Social post that his behavior was punishable by death, that he couldn't handle himself. He got the vapors and he clutched his pearls and he fainted, but not before he could put out a fundraising email. There's no telling what kind of storm we're heading into right now. Unfortunately, we need to be prepared for any outcome. Can you split a donation with Adam Schiff and I to help us raise the resources we're going to need to stand against Trump and the threats coming our way? Yeah. This is the fundraising email he put out within an hour of Trump saying that his behavior was seditious. Oh, he's so upset about it. So very, very upset. Meanwhile, can you answer the one basic question that he still refuses to answer, which is, has President Trump issued any illegal orders? Has he? And in light of the Venezuelan Caribbean boat story, everybody assumes that that's what they're talking about, right? So here's your chance, Senator Kelly. Bring it home. Nail him.
Sort of flimsy legality that was being offered during the briefings. Were these sort of strikes that are now in the news what you were making reference to when you posted that video telling members of the military that they needed to feel okay just obeying orders that they felt were illegal?
Based on who this president is and who the Secretary of Defense is, and specifically things that the president has said in the past and things he was talking about doing in the future. Let me give you an example. 2016, he's talking about something on a debate stage that was clearly illegal. And he was reminded by Brett Baer from Fox News that that would be an illegal order. Military won't do that. You know what the president's response was to that? The military will not refuse my orders. Implying that even if they are illegal, they will not refuse them. He's also talked about shooting protesters in the legs. Then he's talking about deploying more troops to American cities and using those cities as training grounds. Do you know what that means? That means using the American people for the military to train on. So we were looking forward to try to head something off at the pass that could have been really, really bad. So it wasn't about this specific thing.
There you go. So it took him a while to get there. But no, this had nothing to do with the Venezuelan boat thing. It had nothing to do with any orders at all that has ever been issued that we're aware of or that we're not even aware of. It had nothing to do with anything. We were looking forward. So, and again, understand what just happened. Senator Kelly, you were trying to warn against an illegal order and make sure that the military knew, which of course they already know, that they are not obligated and indeed should not follow any order that is illegal in nature, which, by the way, all of these things are talked about before a mission is executed. But that said, Senator Kelly, can you give us an example of an illegal order that President Trump issued? And what did he have to do? He had to go not just to the beginning of this term, not to the 2024 campaign, not to Trump's first term. He had to go to the debate stage in 2016 between the Republican candidates before Trump even was the Republican nominee to give his example. So when Donald Trump was a businessman and reality television star, and he was running for the nomination for the Republicans, he said something on a debate stage, and now, 9 years later, Gollum over here has to put on his old Navy uniform, dust off his medals, and warn everyone in the military that they shouldn't follow Donald Trump's illegal orders. What a disgrace this man is. But I do want to take the moment to correct the record here. Because yesterday, when I was explaining to you what a despicable human being Mark Kelly is, and what a disgusting double standard he holds for this president, the president that you elected, versus our last president, who allowed 13 service members to be murdered in a terrorist attack at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan during his disastrous pullout. And then he had Lloyd Austin, his Secretary of Defense, call for a drone strike that ended up killing an innocent Afghan family on the way to a wedding, but they did it to deflect attention from the terror attack that killed our military. When I was explaining that to you yesterday, I said that Senator Kelly had nothing to say about that drone attack. And I want to correct the record because I'm wrong. In fact, as a senator on the Armed Services Committee, he actually had the opportunity to question the general in charge of Central Command. That was the highest person in the chain of command leading up to the Secretary of Defense during that drone strike. And I want you to see how voracious, how relentless, how absolutely to the letter of the law of the Uniform Code of Military Justice Senator Mark Kelly was in grilling General McKenzie at that time. Because I want to correct the record. I was completely wrong. I said that Mark Kelly had nothing to say about that drone strike, and boy, oh boy, did he ever have something to say about it. Watch this relentless grilling of Biden's general who executed an innocent Afghan family.
Okay, well, thank you. And I know you can't go into much detail about the analysis that led to the August 28th drone strike in Kabul in this open setting, but I would like to note my serious concerns and give you the opportunity to make any comment on how the American people can know that the military will be able to adequately assess targets before conducting future strikes and operations, even as we have even fewer local intelligence and surveillance resources to leverage.
Senator, again, the matter's under investigation, but what I can tell you broadly, and to restate some things I've said earlier, I am responsible for that. It happened in my area of responsibility, so I'm the responsible officer for that strike. Moreover, I was under no pressure, and no one in my chain of command below me was under any pressure to take that strike. We acted based on the intelligence read that we saw on the ground. We acted several times on intelligence that we saw, and we were successful in other occasions in preventing attacks. This time, tragically, we were wrong. And you're right to note that as we go forward and our ability to create what we call the ecosystem that allows you to see what's going on the ground and put all that together, it's going to get a lot harder to do that, particularly in places like Afghanistan. But I can share a little more with you later.
Well, thank you, General.
Yep. Thanks, Jen. Good enough for me. Hey, Kelly out. Drop the mic. Yeah, okay. That's fine with me. Sounds good. Thank you. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth is a war criminal. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is a war criminal. Meanwhile, everybody in the chain of command right now at the Pentagon, all the way down to the sailors of SEAL Team 6, they're all war criminals. They should face Nuremberg trials. What a guy. What a guy Mark Kelly is. The dignified grown-up in the room, the one who really cares about patriotism and the law and the Constitution and the respect that our military is due. What a fraud. What a despicable fraud. Usually, my commentary on issues like this is enough for our program. After all, it's called Larry. But I want to take a moment to show you some commentary from last night's CNN panel program here. Batya Unger did a great job here on the panel. But first, watch how the debate ensued before she put the sledgehammer down.
I'll tell you, terrorists don't travel 11 to a boat, in a speedboat leaving the coast of Venezuela.
So you think Trump is just drone striking boats in the Caribbean?
I am saying that
like
I have been to Iraq, I've been to Syria, I have done airstrikes against terrorists, and this is not what we're dealing with here. That is my opinion. That we are talking about drug mules. When you look at how drug...
All right, I'm sorry. I have to give a little context to how insane this argument is. I just want to make sure that you look at the title right now for the woman who is speaking, who is criticizing the boat strike in the Caribbean against the Venezuelan narco-terrorists. Former Army JAG. Do you know what a JAG is? Judge Advocate General. She's a lawyer. She's a former Army lawyer. And no offense to the great JAGs in the military, whether it's Army or Air Force or the Navy, y'all do a great job. But do you hear how she set that up? She says, let me just tell you something. I'm an expert, and I know for a fact that terrorists don't go 9 in a boat. And then as an example of her expertise, she talks about Iraq and Syria. Because, our efforts in Iraq and Syria were all very much sea-based attacks, weren't they? Everyone knows, well, those terrorists in Iraq were flying up and down the Tigris and the Euphrates in their war machines. But then she makes it sound like she was like commandeering some sort of counter-terrorist attacks in the desert in the Middle East. She's the lawyer. I don't know, maybe she has some level of expertise there, but maybe it's not the same as narco-terrorists coming up on speedboats, bringing cocaine and fentanyl to the shores of America through the Caribbean Sea. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they are two distinct battlegrounds with two very different enemies that utilize different tactics. That said, I'll let her start from the beginning again, because after all, she's the expert here. She's a former Army JAG, after all.
I'll tell you, terrorists don't travel 11 to a boat, in a speedboat leaving the coast of Venezuela.
So you think Trump is just drone striking boats in the Caribbean?
I am saying that
like it?
I have been to Iraq, I've been to Syria, I have done airstrikes against terrorists, and this is not what we're dealing with here. That is my opinion. That we are talking about drug mules. When you look at how drug trafficking works, right? Let's take the September 2nd strike. This is a boat leaving the coast of Venezuela with 11 people on it. That is like drug trafficking 101. You're going to pay the least amount of people and use the most amount of space for drug trafficking, right? You don't want to have to pay 11 people, and you're going to send people who are expendable, by the way. You're not sending your kingpins
Wait, so it's
to
only
traffic
terrorism
drugs.
if you like exceed a number of humans on the boat? Is that the argument?
I'm saying that
She's saying it's drugs, not terrorism.
But do we even
It does
know?
classic
I mean,
sense.
Okay, so now Batya Unger, I always get her name wrong.
Sargon?
Unger Sargon. Thank you. Batya Unger Sargon tries to commandeers the conversation and brings some long-awaited common sense to the panel since Scott Jennings wasn't there. But there's something about that chair. If Scott's not in it, whoever's sitting in it apparently is the only one with a brain.
well, first of all, the story has been massively misreported. So you have actual headlines saying that Hegseth gave the order for the second hit. That wasn't in the initial Washington Post article, which claimed that following, by hearsay, somebody claimed to have heard Hegseth say, we have to kill everybody. Therefore, the admiral gave the second hit. So I just want to clear that up. I think that's why Hegseth wrote the tweet, is to just correct the record. But what I don't understand is it is the Secretary of State's right to determine who is a terrorist and who isn't. The Secretary of State answers to the executive branch. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has determined that these boats are carrying terrorists, which makes the attacks on them legal. And the only question is whether that boat was disabled or whether it was destroyed. If it was destroyed, how were there still live people clinging to it? And if it was only disabled, let me just finish the point, then it was still a threat, meaning it was still a legitimate target. So I'm very confused. And by the way, I've spoken to a lot of veterans today who are also very confused by all of this bipartisan outrage. When working class Americans in those forgotten Rust Belt communities where you have high schools where 5 kids have overdosed and died, when they see him blowing up those boats, they feel like he sees their pain. They feel like somebody cares.
That's right. And on the contrary side of that coin, when they see Army JAG officers who claim that they commandeered airstrikes against terrorists in the Middle East, or when they see talking heads on cable news, or when they see teleprompter readers on talking news, or even when they go all the way up the chain to a glorified patriotic senator like Mark Kelly criticizing these airstrikes and these military strikes, they recognize who's on whose side here. And those very same victims of fentanyl overdoses and the blight that's in our communities right now, they're still on the side of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas opening up our borders and letting all the fentanyl flood in. And they're now on the side of the narco-terrorists and Tren de Aragua coming in from Venezuela on their speedboats. Whether you believe they have 11 people on that boat or not, expert, the bottom line is one side of this coin wants to kill those terrorists and destroy the drugs before it comes to America. And the other side, well, they seem to be defending the very monsters who are bringing those lethal drugs to our shores. Seems like a pretty simple equation to me. And one of those people championing those narco-terrorists, he wants to be your next president. And everyone in the military, if you're watching or if you're listening, if he wins and we have President Mark Kelly getting sworn in 2029, you better believe that he's going to have his Justice Department coming after you for following orders, lawful legal orders from your chain of command. That is a very dangerous situation that we need to avoid at all costs.